was once a merchant who had been prosperous enough to fill his house with comfort, servants, and expectation. But fortune has a habit of changing its face without warning. His ships were lost, his trade collapsed, and the family that had once lived in elegance found itself reduced to plain rooms and necessary labor. Of all his daughters, the youngest bore hardship with the most grace. Because of her goodness and calm mind, she was called Beauty. While her sisters complained of their changed condition, Beauty learned to work quietly, and in losing luxury, she seemed only to gain a clearer light within herself. One day, word reached the merchant that one of his ships might yet have returned, and so he set out in hope. Before he left, his daughters asked for presents. The elder girls demanded dresses, jewels, and ornaments, as though fortune had never truly abandoned them. Beauty asked only for a rose. It was winter, and she knew such a gift might be difficult to find, but its simplicity matched her nature. The journey brought disappointment, not restoration, and the merchant turned homeward through cold and darkness with nothing to show for his hope, except the memory of one humble request he still wished to fulfill. Lost in a winter forest and nearly frozen, the merchant came suddenly upon a castle, shining with impossible light. No servants greeted him, yet food was laid out. A fire burned warmly, and a bed stood ready as though the house itself had taken pity on him. He ate, slept, and in the morning wandered through splendid halls without meeting a soul. Then, in a garden bright even in winter, he saw a single rose bush. Remembering Beauty, he plucked one blossom. At once, the air changed. A terrible roar split the silence, and the master of the castle stepped forth, a beast, vast, sorrowful, and enraged. The beast accused the merchant not of eating his food or warming himself by his fire, but of taking what had been most loved in the garden. For the rose, the beast said, a life must be paid. The merchant fell to his knees and spoke of his children, of his poverty, and of the daughter for whom he had plucked the flower. The beast listened, and instead of killing him at once, offered a grim bargain. The merchant might return home, but if one of his daughters came willingly to the castle in his place, the debt would be accepted. So the father rode back, carrying the rose like a sentence. When the merchant told his story, grief fell over the house like a storm. The elder sisters wept noisily, though their tears held as much fear for themselves as sorrow for Beauty. Beauty alone understood at once what must be done. Her father had suffered enough, and she would not let him return to certain death. She chose to go in his place, not with theatrical courage, but with quiet certainty. They rode together back through the forest, father and daughter both heavy with dread. Yet Beauty's fear was not the same as despair. Something in her nature refused to believe that kindness could ever be wholly lost, even in a place guarded by a monster. At the castle, the merchant was sent away, and Beauty remained. She expected cruelty, yet found none. Her chamber was richer than any room she had known before. Books and music waited for her, and every meal appeared as if by magic. The castle was silent but not hostile. When the beast came, he spoke awkwardly, even timidly, asking only whether Beauty had come of her own free will. She answered yes. Though her voice trembled, the beast did not threaten her. Instead, he said that she was mistress of the house and might walk where she pleased. So fear remained, but it had been complicated by something harder to name: surprise. Each evening, the beast visited Beauty at supper. His appearance was still dreadful: great paws, coarse fur, and a voice like distant thunder. Yet his manner held none of the violence his shape seemed to promise. He He asked if she was afraid. He listened when she spoke. He let silence settle without anger. Still, every night before leaving, he asked the same question in a plain and wounded tone. Would Beauty marry him? And every night she answered no. The refusal never made him furious. He only sighed deeply and withdrew. In time, Beauty learned that gentleness may exist in an ugly body, just as vanity may flourish in beautiful faces. Days passed in comfort, and then in something close to peace. Beauty read, played music, wandered through the gardens, and came to know the Beast as a companion rather than a threat. He was not clever in the polished way of courtiers, but he was honest, patient, and incapable of cruelty toward her. She began to pity his sadness and to wonder what sorrow had made such loneliness dwell inside those vast walls. Fear softened into affection before she realized it had changed. She still could not say she loved him, yet his presence no longer darkened her hours. Instead, his absence began quietly to do so. One night, Beauty dreamed that her father lay ill and calling for her. Distressed, she asked the Beast if she might return home for a short visit. The Beast hesitated, and the room seemed to grow colder around his silence. At last he agreed, but only if she promised to return within a week. He told her more plainly than ever before that without her, he would die of grief. Beauty was moved, though still she did not fully understand her own heart. She left the castle carrying the Beast's generosity with her, and a strange heaviness that did not lift even when she saw her father again. Beauty's father rejoiced at her coming, and for a few days happiness seemed simple. But her sisters, astonished by the fine clothes and prosperity that now surrounded Beauty, grew jealous. They praised her, delayed her, and persuaded her to stay a little longer, knowing that the Beast had asked for her return. Beauty allowed herself to linger. It was not malice that kept her, only the human weakness of postponing pain. Then, after the promised week had passed, she dreamed of the Beast lying alone in the garden, collapsed beside the rose bushes. She woke with such anguish that all hesitation vanished at once. When Beauty returned to the castle, no supper awaited her, and no great figure came slowly to the table. She ran through the silent halls and out into the garden. There, beside the roses, lay the Beast stretched upon the ground, like something already halfway lost to life. He had not raged at her delay, he had simply grieved. Beauty fell beside him and wept, calling him dear friend, begging him not to die, telling him that she had been blind to the truth of her own heart. If he lived, she said, she would marry him gladly. In speaking the words, she understood that they were no sacrifice. They were love. At Beauty's confession, the night itself seemed to change. The Beast vanished, and in his place lay a prince, restored by the breaking of an old enchantment. He told her that he had once been proud and had been condemned to wear a monstrous form until someone could see past it and love him truly. Beauty had done what courts, appearances, and flattery never could. She had recognized the human heart hidden under terror. So the castle that had been lonely became full of life, and Beauty's tale reached its true ending, not in the triumph of prettiness, but in the reward of clear seeing. For the deepest magic in the story is not transformation, but understanding.